Hi, it's Ken from Apple Farm Service. I thought I'd take a minute or two and talk about rotary cutter safety. Some of you might have already gone out and cleared a couple ditches. You might have gone out and cleared some fields. But if you haven't yet, I thought just a couple minutes talk about some safety on rotary cutters. Because of all the equipment you have on your farm, it's one of the most dangerous pieces of equipment if you're not careful with it. So the first tip that I have for you is if you don't have chains on the discharge portion of your rotary cutter, please, 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 I urge you to go buy some chains or get a rubber strap to put along the back. If you can imagine, each blade could be traveling anywhere between 200 to 500 miles an hour depending on how long of a blade it is and what RPMs that you run at. So if you imagine the speed of that blade tip, if it hits something like a rock, a soda can, something that's loose that can shoot out and you don't have any chains on the back, it has a potential to shoot out that fast. And that goes on to the second tip. If you're operating a tractor that has an open cab or an open station, please, please wear safety glasses. Ear protection helps too, but safety glasses, of course. Another thing, when you're operating your rotary cutter, always make sure you know what the angle that your tractor is allowed to carry, so that way you don't have to worry about the tractor on a steep hill either rolling over, which then would cause the rotary cutter to flip over, exposing those blades spinning, which is very, very dangerous, or the rotary cutter sliding down a hill and hitting something that you don't want to hit. So just check your tractor manual to see what they recommend on what degree of a hill you're allowed to go sideways on. Some other things too on your rotary cutter is the gearbox and the gearbox oil. Something you want to check every day. Newer rotary cutters have a little see-through window you can look through. It really is helpful. If not, you might have an old dipstick model that you have to check, but please check that daily before you go out. If you bought a rotary cutter, especially if you bought it from maybe a big box store or you bought it without having the service department be able to take a look at it, check that gearbox oil. A lot of gearboxes have breather valves on them, and so if that had oil in it, but maybe during shipment or delivery, it was on its side or at an angle, some or all of that oil might have leaked out. So always check that before you go out. And of course, make sure the oil that you're using is the correct oil, so that way you don't have it either foam up and not get the protection you want, or is it too hard of an oil and it's going to slow down and add more force through the PTO and through the gearbox. Make sure your blades are sharp too, something that you check once in a while. And if you're ever going to look underneath your rotary cutter or even just walk around it to check it, always make sure that the engine's turned off and that your PTO is not engaged. Please, please, please do that. Another tip to look for before you go out in the fields with your rotary cutter, especially if you just bought one, know if your rotary cutter is a slip clutch or a shear bolt. So the difference, if you're not familiar, a slip clutch, if you hit something hard like a stump or just a patch of something hard that's going to stop the blades enough so the blades can't spin, instead of putting all that force onto your engine, onto your PTO, and onto the gearbox, it's going to have the clutch slip. And then you can easily just unslip it after you get the obstacle clear and you can go on. Maybe some cheaper models might still have a shear bolt to it, and so it's just going to be a bolt that's made after so much force is going to split. So it's always handy if you have a rotary cutter that has a shear bolt, buy some extra shear bolts to have on hand just in case it happens, so you can quickly change that while you're out in the field rather than having to bring it back to the shop or to your barn, to your house, then fix it. Some it's not as common, but there still might be some either older or very inexpensive rotary cutters that don't have either. They don't have a shear bolt and they don't have a slip clutch. Be very careful with those. We recommend you stay away from those because if you happen to hit something hard, all that force is going to go straight into the gearbox and or onto your PTO, which then has such a higher risk of your gearbox breaking or hurting your engine and your engine components with that much force on the PTO, which if you've ever had a rotary cutter long enough and had to replace the gearbox, you know that is the most expensive part of the rotary cutter. And the last tip I have is that always be conscious when you're using your rotary cutter that there's no people around. If there's vehicles that are going by and passing you, we highly recommend turn off the PTO at least. If something were to happen, that a rock were to come out and they can claim and have proof that it came from your rotary cutter, I mean, you would be at blame for that incident. So it's just best practice that if vehicles are passing you, if there's people that are either riding their bicycles by you or just walking by you, just go ahead and just turn your PTO off until they're a safe distance away. Good rule of thumb is about 200 feet or more would be a good rule of thumb to make sure that you wait until you turn your PTO back on for your rotary cutter. So if you have any more questions about your rotary cutter, if you're looking for parts, if you're looking for service on your rotary cutter, Apple Farm Service carries Bush Hog, Land Pride, Woods, and Rhino, plus plenty of other aftermarket parts as well. So you can just reach out to your local Apple Farm Service. You can visit us at applefarmservice.com. From all of us here at Apple Farm Service, we wish you the best of luck on your rotary cutting season. Thank you.